With that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Duke Pesta.
Well, thank you for being here. It's always good for a laugh when you come down from Wisconsin and hear people in Texas talking about cold weather. I left, there was still snow all over the place in Wisconsin. Flew to Minneapolis. The only benefit we have in living in Wisconsin is we don't live in Minnesota, where they have even more still. So we got that going for us. We did have, I fought with it. I've got a bit of a technology issue with the sound, so I'm going to have to stand over here and magnify the speakers when we get to certain video clips. But other than that, I think this should go pretty well. I'm really grateful to be here with you today. I've given hundreds and hundreds of talks, testified before 24 different state legislatures about the evils of Common Core and the federal takeover of education. You, the great state of Texas, are one of 4 states that never formally accepted Common Core. Congratulations. It's in all your schools anyway. Right? Every single one of your schools, particularly in the major cities, have Common Core all over the place. And the reason why, your state legislature pretty much said, we formally reject Common Core, but guess what? Your local school districts have school choice, right? So the state legislature can't really force a school district to take or not take something, which means most school districts are run by progressives, which means Common Core is here to stay. And so what I want to talk to you about today is a little bit about the rise of FedEd, and then I want to spend a little time doing something I don't usually get to do at talks. Spend the last part of my talk talking a little bit about one solution we came up with to try to fight back a little bit about how we protect our kids in this current educational environment. So without further ado, let's just start. You all remember this guy, right? This is Jonathan Gruber, one of the architects of Obamacare, who's now been indicted, by the way. And this is well after Common Core was put in place. He was indicted for profiteering on the back of Obamacare. Here's what he said in November 2014, after the health care law was put in place.
You had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, it made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money. It would not have passed. Okay? Just like the lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting the thing to pass.
Lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. If we had, you remember Nancy Pelosi telling us that we'll have to pass Obamacare to know what's in it. And so the problem that we have with this is that most of the things, the worst things that are happening in American government aren't happening at the will of the people. We're not consulted, we don't have a vote in it. As bad as the Obamacare health care is, fact is that it's a model of transparent government compared to how they changed your schools.
That's right.
Obamacare had a hearing before the House and the Senate. It was on C-SPAN ad, we're talking about it. The Supreme Court determined certain aspects of the Obamacare health law. The Common Core takeover of education, the federal takeover of education, not one bit of that was ever announced or discussed or voted on. The House and the Senate had nothing to do with it. It never came before the Supreme Court. The federal government took over your kids' education. And that's true here in Texas, too. I'll show you that before we're done. The federal government took over, really took over the education, the public schools in this country, without ever letting anybody know it. And it started very early on. This fella is David Coleman. And I would be very surprised if you knew who he was. David Coleman is the architect of Common Core. He has no educational experience whatsoever. He's never been a teacher, he's never taught a course, he's never taken a class in education, he has no credentials in education. He was appointed by the Obama administration to oversee the creation of the Common Core state standards. In fact, his whole claim to fame, David Coleman, is that in 2008, when Obama was running for president the first time, he was the social media director of Obama's first campaign, which means he got lots of millennials and young kids out to vote for Obama in 2008. That's his sole qualification to be in charge of your kids' education. In fact, let me introduce this to you. Let me introduce him to you. I'm going to have to use the microphone here. Here's David Coleman, 2011, when Common Core first hit the ground running. Here's David Coleman being introduced to a group of teachers who he is now the boss of.
He has been involved in virtually every step of setting the national standards, and he doesn't have a single credential for it. He's never taught in an elementary school, I think. I actually don't know. He's never edited a scholarly journal, but I think he has written scholarly papers. And a variety of other things that everybody here has done some of. He hasn't done.
He has not done.
Someone with Lawrence experience.
Sorry.
Would understand you never tell the truth when you're introducing someone.
He said there at the end, you think someone of Lauren's experience would understand you never tell the truth when you're introducing somebody. Here's an individual with absolutely no credentials over education whatsoever. He is in charge of a room full of teachers now. He's in charge of the entire federal Common Core program. And we'll talk about that as we move forward here. But understand this, right? That this was done without any publicity. This was without teachers weren't consulted, teachers unions weren't consulted, local superintendents weren't consulted. Common Core, they call them the Common Core state standards. States were not involved in the writing of Common Core. Teachers weren't involved. Governors, people want to make the argument that governors had something to do with the state standards. Let me ask you a question. How many governors in this country are qualified to write education standards? They keep telling you the governors did it, which now you know they didn't. This is the guy who's in charge of it. I wouldn't want my guy, I live in Wisconsin, we got Scott Walker, I wouldn't want him writing education standards. And so all the lies that were told to you about Common Core, after, just like with Obamacare and John Gruber, after it was done, these people began to speak about it. It gets even more interesting when you think about a group just like John Gruber. David Coleman made millions and millions and millions of taxpayer dollars assisting in the implementation of these standards. So much so that he's actually made more money than Jonathan Gruber did on it. And he's got an education firm that's benefited from the federal power that was given him. And remember, if you don't know his name, that's great. But he's never been elected to anything, so you have no control over him. The people who transformed your kid's education, you have no representative government to be able to help you with. They've never held public office. They're not accountable to the president or the Congress or the Senate. These people were just appointed. This is what we call banana republic stuff, right? People nobody's ever heard of, without any qualifications, given incredible authority over something like public schools. In fact, listen to him talk about his organization in this clip.
So with that in mind, I'm about to jump in, but I'm just going to say one word about my own organization, which is Student Achievement Partners. Student Achievement Partners, all you need to know about us are a couple of things. One is we're composed of that collection of unqualified people who were involved in developing the common standards.
We are that collection of unqualified people who wrote your kids' educational standards. Right? This stuff has been around since 2011. This is not new. You could walk into any Texas school tomorrow and ask the principal. You could walk in and talk to any superintendent of Texas schools. They'll tell you Common Core was written by the states. They'll tell you teachers wrote Common Core. They will tell you that Common Core was something that was broadly shared among the governors. It never was. You just heard it, right? Who are we? Student Achievement Partners. We are that collection of unqualified people who wrote your kids' standards. Here's the other thing that drives me nuts. I'm a 25-year teacher myself. Most of that taught at the university level. I'm still a professor at the University of Wisconsin right now. And the biggest problem with Common Core for me as a teacher is how it cuts the ability of teachers to teach. Everything is scripted now. Everything is run by, even with Donald Trump as president. Remember when Donald Trump promised he was going to get rid of the Department of Education? Didn't really do that, did he? No. And he appointed to the Department of Education Betsy DeVos, who's a very nice woman, but is not getting rid of the Department of Education. Betsy DeVos said about 6 months ago, we don't have to remove Common Core from your schools because Common Core is already gone. So you spend billions and billions of dollars putting it in. You completely hijack the way teachers are trained. You bring in all the Common Core related textbooks and relegate the entire system to a set of national tests, and it goes away just because you elected a different president. Well, check in your public schools. Go find out what your kids and grandkids are bringing home every day. Look at the books they bring home from school, if they bring any home at all. You will see Common Core all over it. It's not gone away. It's become viral. The entire educational system now is dictated by a Common Core methodology, and this really does undercut teachers. Because if any of you have been teachers before, you know teachers, and you've taught your own kids and grandkids, right? You know that not every kid learns the same way. What's best about teachers is real teachers had the ability to throw a book out or to go away from the curriculum if it wasn't working. Hey, 25 kids aren't paying any attention to this. Let's put it away and try some other way to educate our kids. But you can't do that in government schools now because the whole thing is on a schedule and the whole thing is orchestrated around standards and exams that require certain things every day. And so why have so many senior teachers walked away? Because they're not teachers anymore. And what do the young teachers being trained to do? Not to teach, but simply to implement the program. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in California, the state of California has actually formally renamed teachers. If you're a teacher in middle, elementary, or high school in California, you're not called teacher anymore. You are called a facilitator. And think about what facilitators do. A facilitator, a teacher is somebody with individual gifts, knowledge, creativity to hand to kids. A facilitator is simply somebody who is handed something and passes it on to somebody else. That's what's happened here. And so as a teacher myself, one of the biggest lies about Common Core, this is one you could walk into your Texas schools tomorrow, and they'll tell you, oh, our teachers are free to teach to the standards any way they want. Our teachers have absolute freedom to meet these standards 1,000 different ways. Well, listen to what David Coleman said about that in 2012 as the standards were being rolled out.
Which is teachers will teach towards the test. There is no force strong enough on this earth to prevent that. There's no amount of hand-waving. There's no amount of saying they teach to the standards, not the test. We don't do that here, whatever.
There is no force strong enough on this planet to stop your teachers from teaching to my tests. They can only teach what's on my test. To teach things that aren't on my tests means that your kids will be preparing for questions they can't answer. And again, remember what I told you? He's never held public office. He's not accountable to you and me, the taxpayers. We're the ones who fund the government public schools, right? He's not accountable to us. Not accountable to government, not accountable to the Senate, the Congress, the President. He just told you that there is no force strong enough on this earth to prevent your teachers from teaching what we want taught on the basis of those tests. That's the situation we are in now. Oh, and by the way, David Coleman, guess where he is now that there are Common Cores in your schools? Would it surprise you to learn that David Coleman, without an ounce and an iota of educational experience, is now the president of the college boards? You know, the organization that writes your kids' ACTs to get into college? The man who wrote the standards, without any educational experience, is now in charge of the ACTs and is rewriting them to conform to his standards. Which means if you educate your kids outside of the Common Core paradigm, there is a danger that when they sit down to take their college exams, they will not have been trained in a Common Core way. Again, let's not forget that who funds the college boards to write all these tests? We do, the taxpayers again. So again, David Coleman is in charge. Would it also surprise you to learn that the Common Core, David Coleman, at the college board, he is in charge of the advanced placement test your kids take in high school. Kids all across America, including Texas, are paying money in their junior and senior years to take an advanced placement course. Those courses are written and examined by the college board, David Coleman's organization. And it makes sense, right? You're a high school junior and senior. You can pay $100, take an advanced placement history course, American history course, and if you score 3 out of 5 on the test, get a 3 or above on the test, you opt out of your college American history requirement. So you can do that, right? You can take for $100, and it makes kind of financial sense. The average college course is going to cost you what? $3,500 plus another $200 for books. So the kids all across the country, millions and last I saw, about 22 million kids are taking AP tests in this country because you get out of college courses. Well, David Coleman's organization is in charge of those exams now, and guess what he's done? He's rewriting them one by one to conform to Common Core. And it will not surprise you to learn that the very first AP exam he rigged 3 years ago was American history. And so, the new advanced, this is 3 years ago, the new advanced placement U.S. history framework departs radically from traditional AP courses and reflects progressive philosophy and leftist bias. Forget the Founding Fathers and the Declaration of Independence that proclaimed the natural right of freedom and self-government. Concentrate instead on the racist cultural imperialism that supposedly built America. Are you watching on TV? All these late-night talk show hosts, people sticking microphones under kids on college campuses' faces and asking them to name who their vice president is, or asking them to name what form of government we have, and they can't do it. Kids at Harvard paying $100,000 a year for an education can't do it. This is why, in part, right? What Coleman did, and think about how devastating this is. All 50 states offer the same AP tests. Whoever controls those tests dictates what the teachers have to teach. If your kids were paying $100 to take this test and failing it, they wouldn't take it anymore. In order for your teachers to continue to teach at the high school level, they have to teach to what the test dictates, right? Makes sense. The kids are taking the test to opt out of a college class. They have to pass those tests, which means whoever controls the tests controls what happens in the classroom. And what's happened is, all 50 states now have more or less jettisoned in the AP courses their version of American history to teach this one, including states like Texas, by the way. Right? What the American history Texas kids are learning in their AP classes. See, Texas has a great American history program, but if you're taking AP, you're exempt from it because you have to prepare for this test. And so these teachers now are forced to adjust what they teach our kids to mirror the test. When David Coleman, over 300 university history professors, over 300, mostly liberals, petitioned David Coleman 3 years ago not to do it, begged him don't do it. If you do this, they said, collectively, you will be teaching kids a false view of American history. Do you know what his response to that was, David Coleman? There it is. To objections that students will learn an inaccurate version of American history, David Coleman of the College Board said, quote, "Facts aren't that important in history anyway." The entire AP history test that your kids take for American history is not based on what happened historically. It's based on 3 narrative assumptions. America is a racist country, America is a sexist country, America is a homophobic country. Those are the essays AP kids have to write on. Now, if that's what the test is, then guess what? The textbook they use has radically changed. In the previous slide, it mentioned Forget the Founding Fathers. In the new AP history course, there's not a single mention of the colonial wars, the Revolutionary period. There is no mention whatsoever of the Declaration of Independence. There is no reference whatsoever to the Constitution in the entire book. It's about a 1,200-page book. Primarily, American history begins for these kids in the Progressive era. Early 19th century, early 20th century. That's when it begins. It ignores even the Civil War isn't covered. I'll give you one example from the actual book. Thomas Jefferson is mentioned once in the entire framework. He gets about 3 sentences. Those 3 sentences describe him as a slaveholder and nothing else. No other mention to Jefferson. And my personal favorite is what the book does to George Washington. Here's the actual book. It's the preferred text, the mandatory textbook for AP US history is a textbook called Out of Many. And I love the title, Out of Many. That's half of one of our national mottos, right? What's the other half? One. E pluribus unum, right? This textbook betrays what it is. We are not one. We are 1,000 different little balkanized groups of people living together, right? Different languages, different cultures. The whole melting pot idea is disastrous. It's painted now as racist on your college and on high school campuses. The idea that you come to this country to become an American is actually considered racist at my university in Wisconsin. If you argue that in class, that when people come here as immigrants, they have a moral or ethical or legal obligation to become Americans, you will be called a racist for saying that. So the textbook is simply Out of Many. Here's the only paragraph you get about George Washington. Nothing else. It reads like this. Although he dressed in plain American broadcloth at his inauguration and claimed to be content with a plain Republican title, Washington was counted among the nationalists. He was anything but a man of the people. By nature reserved and solemn, he chose to ride about town in a grand carriage drawn by 6 horses and escorted by uniformed liverymen. In the tradition of British royalty, he delivered his addresses personally to Congress and received from both houses an official reply. So in other words, George Washington was no better than King George. He was a nationalist, he was a king, he rode around like British royalty, he was not a man of the people. That's it, no crossing of the Delaware, no Thanksgiving Day prayer, none of the rest of it. My very famous George Washington anecdote, which of course isn't mentioned here as they try to paint him as just one king substituted for another, was when he was actually offered a crown, right? The colonials actually offered Jefferson the crown, and he walked away from it. At which point, in England, when they found out about it, one of King George's ministers came to the king and said, "Sir, it appears that President Washington has rejected a crown." At which point King George said, "If that's true, he will go down as the greatest man in history." But this is what your kids learn about George Washington now, right? And so, Whoever controls the tests controls your kids' education. Who controls the tests that are getting your kids into college now? The Common Core people. Who controls the yearly tests that your kids spend weeks and weeks and weeks taking and months preparing for? The Fed, the Common Core people do. All of this, the AP exams that your kids take to get out of college course, who controls them now? The same people. Right? When they tell you Common Core isn't in your classrooms, there is nobody in your kids' classrooms with an I like Common Core badge sitting there monitoring things. They don't have to. Right? The whole thing is orchestrated from the top down that way. And the sex standards, right? National sexuality standards. Why is there, you paying attention to the news, you see all this radical sexuality for kids now, right? We've got kids as young as 5 and 6 and 7 in elementary school being taught white privilege, being taught transgenderism, being taught in 6th grade, 5th grade, 2nd grade, that boys and girls are social constructs, there are no such things as that. Where does it come from? Well, it's part of the same program here, right? These are the national sexuality education standards. You can call this document up online, it's 64 pages. This is the federal sex ed program that you've never heard of. And it was designed to 2012. Very year Common Core was put in your schools, this appeared on your radar screen. That's the year it was published. People will say, Common Core, Dr. Pesta, there's nothing sexual about it. Well, if you look at this Common Core standards written by David Coleman, you don't see sex. If you look at this document, and look at the subtitle of this. These are the National Sexuality Education Standards. They are core content, right? What fills the core? The Common Core is just a really low, socially driven, not educationally driven set of tepid standards. Something's got to fill them out, right? That's where all the pedagogy came in, all the textbooks, the worksheets. Bill Gates spent about $6 billion producing all this material and feeding it into the schools, right? Your teachers in Texas went home one June, about 7 years ago now, went home for the summer for June. They came back in September, and all the textbooks have been replaced. All the computer programs have been changed. And what was in place now was all the Common Core stuff. Your teachers were never trained about Common Core. They had to learn it on the fly when they came back. Even in a state like Texas, where you say you didn't take it, well, you had something just as bad before it. Remember you had C-Scope? Yeah. C-Scope was that was the warm-up. That was the primer for Common Core. You dutifully got rid of it at the legislative level. But again, and I'm not blaming legislators. The legislators said we don't want it in our state. But if the legislators go into every public school and force them to remove those books, that's not going to look really good, number one. Because all the teachers said they wanted them. And all the superintendents said they wanted them. And furthermore, all of those books were paid for by somebody else. All the Common Core books, almost all the Common Core books in your schools in Texas were not paid for by the Texas legislature. People like Gates made sure you had them. So now, if you want to pull Common Core out of your local schools, guess what? You're going to have to pony up all kinds of money to find replacement textbooks. And where are you going to get them from? For the last 5 years, all the new big textbook companies are only publishing Common Core texts. You can't even find anymore non-Common Core textbooks to buy. That's the whole way this was done, right? And so good Republican lawmakers that I've met, and I told you, I testified before 24 different state legislatures, and it's the same thing I hear over and over again. Privately, they pull me aside and they say to me, we don't have the money. Even if the entire state of Wisconsin tomorrow tried to drive Common Core out of the schools, where would we raise tens and tens of millions of dollars to replace all those materials? And even if we did replace them with tens and tens of millions of dollars, then we'd have to create our own tests. Because the new federal mandate says that all states have to test a certain way. Oh, and by the way, Republicans passed that too. That's the Every Student Succeeds Act, passed in December 2015 by Paul Ryan from my state. Paul Ryan, this is an 1,100-page education bill, 1,100 pages. Paul Ryan gave his caucus 16 hours to read it. Nobody read it. In December, 4 days before Christmas, right? And remember, in 2015, you had a Republican majority in the Senate and in the Congress, right? Obama was still president. The Republicans, led by Paul Ryan, crafted an 1,100-page bill. And what did that bill do? The Every Student Succeed Act. It goes back and retroactively legalizes all the illegal moves the Obama administration made in putting Common Core in your schools to begin with. So bad was this that Arne Duncan, who was Barack Obama's Secretary of Education who put most of this in, Arne Duncan called it an absolute miracle that Paul Ryan and the Republicans would pass a law that so confers upon federal education all the rights and responsibilities the Constitution denied it. For the first time in American history, thanks to the ESSA Act, 2015, the federal government now actually can legally control education. Prior to that, they couldn't. All this Common Core stuff, it's technically illegal. The Constitution allows no place for this kind of centralized federal control. The first battle was lost, of course, when we created the Department of Education in 1979 for no purpose. And remember how Ronald Reagan swept into a huge landslide victory in part by promising to remove the Department of Education. And you know what? Every Republican candidate and every Republican president who was running for president since 1980 said they would remove it, and no one removes it.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have this big federal entity now who's in charge of education. What did we think was going to happen? Here we are 50 years later, 40 years later, and it's happened. What happened first in 1979 was, now all the money that went to the states for education from Congress went directly to the states in 1978. Right? States, as Congress adjudicated on the basis of population density and other factors, Congress decided what every state got for each of their students. And the money went directly from the Congress to the states. Along comes the Department of Education. Now all that money goes first to the Department of Education. The Congress allows so much money, then it goes to the feds. Then the feds decide who gets it. And guess what the federal government did for 40 years? Schools, states, and districts that adopted Department of Education, progressive education techniques, that adopted standardized tests, that adopted all these reforms, they got more money. States that didn't got less. So guess what states did? They all conformed, right? And here you are 40 years later with this. Thank you, Republican Party. Again, I want to remind you, I'm a Republican. 2015 December, Paul Ryan and the Republican Congress and Mitch McConnell and the Republican Senate passed the ESSA Act, which sets in stone all of this Common Core stuff. Made it easier, legal now. It's where we find ourselves now. How about math? That's Jason Zimba. He's one of the 5 people who wrote the Common Core standards with David Coleman. He is actually at least an actual mathematician. In this short interview, Jason Zimba is going to admit to you on film that his Common Core math program is not going to make your kids prepared for college level math. He's going to admit that. So my math program is not going to make your kids ready for college math, number one. Number two, he's going to admit that Common Core will not prepare your kids for STEM careers. We've created a national math program that will not prepare your kids for careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. Right? He's being interviewed here by Sandy Stotsky, who was on the board of Common Core and quit because it was so bad. She's going to interview Jason Zimba about his own math program. Here you go.
The definition of college readiness, I think it's a fair critique that it's a minimal definition of college readiness.
The definition of college readiness, I think it's a fair critique. It's a minimal definition.
The definition of college readiness, I think it's a fair critique that it's a minimal definition of college readiness.
For some colleges.
Well, for the colleges most kids go to, but not that most parents probably aspire, right?
It's not for STEM, it's not for international.
That's true. It's not only not for STEM, it's also not for selective colleges.
My math program is not only not for STEM careers, it is not for selective colleges. He's going to tell you in a moment, I won't interrupt him again. He's going to tell you in a moment that, for instance, if your kid wants to go to UC Berkeley, he better have advanced math or calculus if he wants to be an engineer. But a selective college is any college that has a basic math standard. They all do. My math program is not for STEM careers. It's not for college. I have a professor friend who teaches at Florida State University, FSU. He is got 2 PhDs in math, this guy, and he works part-time for NASA down there doing mathematical equations. He called me up almost in tears last August because his university, Florida State, had assigned him to teach 2 sections of 7th grade math for the incoming college freshmen. At the University of Wisconsin, which is considered a very well-regarded system, I'm an English professor, I'm a professor of English. I teach things like Shakespeare. My senior and junior English majors at the University of Wisconsin have about a 9th grade reading level. 9th grade reading level, right? And that's most of them. And so what's happening here? The premise of Common Core. The federal government almost never names things what they mean them to be. But you think about the Affordable Care Act. I mean, did anybody really believe it was going to be affordable? No. But in the interest of Common Core, they actually did it for the one time. Because Common Core means one thing. Raise your hands if your kids and grandkids are common. Not one of you? Elitists. Raise your hands if your kids are standard. See, that's it. That tells you what Common Core is. That tells you what Jason Zimba's doing here. Common Core means we are not going to educate kids to their strengths. We are not going to educate kids as fast and as hard as we can so that kids can be as much of what they can be. That's socially unjust. See, your kids are better at math than my kids, and that's just not fair. Even though some kids are naturally mathematicians and others aren't. I never was. I became an English professor precisely because I could barely count and add. Right? And so, but that's social injustice. All kids should come out of school with the same math. And let me make this point. If you're going to get 60 million American public school kids to exactly the same place in math, by definition, is it going to be a higher place or a lower place? Lower. See, that's enough math. I know enough math to know that, right? Statistically, if you're going to get 60 million kids at the same place, you have to lower the standards. Because every time you raise them, kids fall off. The common in Common Core means exactly that. We are only going to give your kids an education that everybody can understand. If everybody can't read at a 6th grade level, then everyone will read at a 4th grade level. If everybody can't do math at a high school level, then we're going to make sure everybody only has access to a middle school math curriculum. That's what this is. This is, you want to know a word for it? This is social justice education. Yeah. It is the argument that the primary purpose of our schools, and this is true at the colleges too, isn't it? The primary, UT Austin, good God. The primary purpose of our schools, we all know what the University of Wisconsin-Madison is actually called the Berkeley of the Midwest, right? I think we should call it the UT Austin of the Midwest. Yeah. Is there a difference? But what do I mean when I say social justice education? The first purpose of education is not excellence or achievement or merit. It's not career readiness like they used to throw around. It is simply inculcating social virtues, progressive social virtues in our kid. Without stopping it again, listen to Jason Zimba here, what he's doing.
The definition of college readiness, I think it's a fair critique that it's a minimal definition of college readiness.
For some colleges.
Well, for the colleges most kids go to, but not that most parents probably aspire, right?
It's not for STEM, it's not for international.
That's true. It's not only not for STEM, it's also not for selective colleges that, for example, UC Berkeley, even whether you're going to be an engineer or not, you better have pre-calculus to get into UC Berkeley.
We have to think of our engineering colleges,
and that's
scientific.
That's true. I think the third pathway goes a lot towards that, but your issue is really broader than that.
Oh yes.
So I just wanted to make sure that we got that.
Listen to this.
Selective colleges. There's a much broader question here.
That's right. It's both, I think, in the sense of being clear about what this college readiness does and doesn't get you, and that's the big subject.
But not to call something college ready when it only applies to a certain kind of college and a certain lower level of mathematical expertise that won't buy you far on the international market in most major disciplines of technology, economics, business, and so on.
And all he can do is shake his head yes. This is Common Core math, right? And so what that means is when I was in 2nd grade, I could read very well, but I couldn't do math very well. So in 2nd grade, I actually was reading 9th grade books. They allowed me to do that, even though most of the other kids in the class couldn't. When I was in 2nd grade, I was also doing 1st grade math. But you know, we're not common, right? Some kids are math gifted, some kids are writing gifted, some kids read well. But that's not right. That's not acceptable anymore. Kids have to be a common kid. Albert Einstein, in 1935, after the Nazis took power, Albert Einstein said, because this is exactly what the Nazis did, they standardized kids. They actually reduced kids to what would make every kid the same kid, good tools of the state. Seeing that's one of the reasons Einstein ran away from Germany. He said, we standardize automobiles. We should never standardize children. Right? That's exactly what the whole plan is. Now, tonight, if you're free and you want more of this, I'm giving a talk in this very room, right? Or right down the hall here, on the universities. I know that better than this, even. So if you want to know how the universities became agents of social justice, let's have a conversation tonight at 7. But I'll simply say this, so that's a little advertisement. Before I move to the last little part of what I'm going to tell you, usually I give this talk, it takes 2 hours. I'm doing this in about 35 minutes. I've got a lot more stuff, I've got all kinds of slides. If you want more of this information, I'll send it to you. But you've seen enough, I think, to get the general gist of it. This is education whose primary purpose is to dumb down our kids, not because we want dumb kids necessarily, but because dumb is fair if everyone's dumb. We can't get think about it. We've been waging the war on poverty for 50 years. We've got as much poverty as ever before. Transferred $16 trillion from haves to have-nots, that poverty hasn't gone. Maybe Jesus was onto something when he said, the poor will always be with you. But it's the same thing with education. We've been waging this war, expensive war on ignorance. And you know what we haven't done? We haven't raised the bottom-performing kids at all. The same percentage of, a little bit more, higher actually, percentage of bottom-feeding kids. So what do? You can't raise the low performers? How about we hold down the high achievers? We've lost more gifted and talented education programs in our government schools in the last 2 years than in the previous 50 years combined. They're going away because you don't need them, right? And that's what we've got done here. So in the time that I have left, I do want to spend some time talking to you about one alternative we came up with. I'm again a 25-year university professor and taught a little bit in high school. And it started to dawn on me about 10 years ago that by the time these kids were getting to me, they were so undereducated, so culturally ignorant. Not stupid kids by any means. They just hadn't been pushed, motivated, they hadn't been given good materials. But there's also little I could do about it. Right? What can I do about it? Get a 19-year-old coming to you as a freshman. Right? It's been accepted to the university, and the freshmen in college have about a 7th grade reading level, more or less. So what do you do? Right? I told you I teach Shakespeare, right? I used to teach, 25 years ago when I started teaching college, I teach 13 plays a semester. I teach 4 now, because they can't write. I got to spend 2 weeks on one act of a Shakespeare play, 8 pages, because they can't think, I got to try to read it. I have to teach them literally to put subject and verb together. They can't do it. And so it dawned on me that if this is the reality, and it is the reality, it's getting worse every year, then if I'm going to have any impact on education at all, I got to get them younger. And so got involved with a group called FreedomProject, and we put together, you have the program guide for it, we put together, we decided to use technology in our interests for a change, and we created a virtual classroom. It's wonderful what you can do. We have real teachers with headsets now being beamed into kids' homes and teaching them. And doing all the great, the big fear for most moms and dads with homeschooling is not money. It's, are we qualified to do this? What do we know about teaching calculus or the Constitution to kids? Well, we have qualified teachers doing it. And they have classrooms too. It's not like just an individual tutorial. Every kid's in a room with 20 other kids. All over the country, all over the world. And the teacher, all the kids' names are there, and the teacher can call on them, they can speak in class, the teachers can put them in little breakout rooms and have them come back to class. You can have the benefits of an actual qualified, non-union, non-progressive teacher. How many of those are there? Right? Because we don't hire those teachers. We actually primarily like to hire teachers without stupid education degrees. I teach education majors. Without any, I'm trying to insult anybody, I have an education person too. But the education major at most major colleges is a disaster. Well, think about it. Your kid wants to be a high school math teacher. The education professors don't teach your kids math. The education professors send your kids to the math department to learn math. Your kid wants to be a middle school English teacher. The education people don't teach your kids middle school English. English professors do. All that the education people do on campus is all the theory, right? It's all that abstract, progressive, left-wing social theory. Just let English professors train English teachers and math professors train math professors. Get rid of the stupid education departments. Because all they're doing is theorizing and socializing and politicizing your kids' education. We don't hire those teachers. And so what we can do is, we have former accountants teaching business and math, right? We have, and you go down the list there. But the nice thing about it is it allows parents to be in charge of their kids' education without having necessarily to assume the role of teacher and wear all those hats. And the nice thing about our classes is they're live. Kids will log on 2 or 3 times a week at a certain hour, have all their classmates there, they have a real class, and the nice thing is the moment the class is done, it's immediately uploaded. So mom and dad, at their leisure, can watch it 24/7, 365 days a year. A mom has the theoretical ability in our school to see every single second of what their kids learned and how they learned it. And the nice thing about this, if you're a bad math kid like me, I married a Texas girl who's mad at me because she's up in the snow right now. I married a Texas girl who knows math, right? But this business here about learning things and how we do them, how do I phrase this? Well, let me go a little bit forward and show you some of it. I'll get to that in a second. this business about the classroom. Not only moms and dads have access 24/7, but if you're a bad math kid like I was, think about this. Kid goes to public school, teacher goes over this one concept for 10 minutes and moves on. If the kid doesn't get that concept, they're not going to figure out what's going on after it, right? Kid comes home and tries to tell you where they fell down. They didn't understand the concept. Now, you could go watch that math course with Freedom Project, and you could sit down with a kid and watch it 3 and 6 and 10 times, right? And so every course then becomes available that way. And so we do 4 things at Freedom Project as a way to try to fix these problems. We are an academy. We partner with churches, because we're completely on. Think about how many churches are empty every day of the week except Saturday and Sunday.
Most of them.
Exactly. What if we were able to get a big screen computer in one room of those churches, and 12 moms and dads could drop their kids off to a youth pastor and do school right there, without the burden of insurance and indemnity, all that other stuff that you have to worry about with teachers when you bring them in. So we partner with actual churches to make churches schools if they want. We are creating curriculum because, as I just said to you, all the major textbook companies are no longer publishing non-Common Core textbooks. They want to make money, right? They're not going to sell you their old stuff. They want you to buy the expensive new stuff. So none of them are selling the old stuff. And finally, we have a media division, because in this world of young people, young parents and kids, if you don't get their attention through media, you might as well forget it. The days of young parents today sitting down and reading periodicals, it's over, right? It's fast-paced in media. So quickly to show you some of this stuff. Our school, well, we are based on we're a Christian school, based on Judeo-Christian values. What do I mean by Judeo-Christian? Sorry, Bill. What do I mean by Judeo-Christian? I mean that the 10 Commandments matter as much as the Sermon on the Mount in some ways. And so our kids get all of that. We have prayer in the classroom. We start every class with a prayer. But we're also a classical curriculum. We teach classical schooling, right? We try to give our kids the education the Founding Fathers would have gotten with updated science, right? We want them to know about, all of our kids at elementary, middle, and high school have to take an economics class, right? Basic to advanced. We have them learn languages that are going to matter to them. And this is big. I mentioned the live online. We take no federal money, no state or federal money. We don't take a penny. I keep hearing from Wisconsin that they're so broke. The teachers are so broke. We have no money. And yet, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction emails me, or hard copy mails me, once a week trying to give me money. Because they know, the minute I take one stinking dime from the state, city, or feds, then they'll tell me what to do, right? That's why be careful about charter and voucher schools. Every charter and voucher, and this has already happened in 14, I don't know if it's happened in Texas yet, it's happened in 14 states. Charters sound great. We could use the state will pay us a certain money to go to the school. 14 states have already said now, oh, and by the way, since we're paying you to send your kid to charter school, you're going to have to take the Common Core tests, or your charter school is going to have to take Common Core pedagogy. 14 states it's happened to already, right? The money, and so for as broke as Wisconsin schools claim to be, they find money every month, every week to send me we'll give you this, we'll give you that. That's how you stay free. No federal money, no state money. We've been around 7 years, and we started with 22 high school kids 7 years ago. We now have over 700 kids in 14 different states, and all 50 states in 14 different foreign countries. In just the last year alone, we've been moving. Not only do we have full-time students, we are fully accredited at the national level, which means your kids go to Freedom Project, they get a high school diploma, and they get into college. We had a kid just last year, who got a full ride here to Baylor. And so we've got over 2,000 seats full. We actually, this is nice too, when you join us, not only do you get the free lectures, but you get free tutoring too. So every teacher has office hours. A couple times a week where he or she will be online, and if you just want to pop in and ask him, kids struggling with this, we don't know how to help them with it, you can get that done as well. That's up, the tutoring is up 234%. Here's the thing, we give free placement exams to anybody in the world who wants them. Math and reading. Give free placement exams, you want to take one. Don't tell us you're not 6 years old, take one of our free placement exams. We'll grade it and get it back to you. Here's the thing, on average, kids that come to us from the public schools, on average are 2 years behind where they should be. 6th graders are doing 4th grade work, 9th graders are doing 7th grade work. It's demonstrable. By the way, this is not arbitrary. If you want your kids, theoretically, to be ready for calculus by the time they graduate high school, if that's what you want, then you know, at 3rd grade they better be doing this, at 6th grade they better be doing this, at 9th grade they better be doing this. It's not that complicated. We stagger it that way. We want our kids, by the time they graduate high school, to be able to pick up Shakespeare and read it, to be able to be prepared for a course in calculus. You're going to do that, and when we do that, 2 years, 2 full years, kids are behind where they should be. The nice thing about our school, too, is if you've got a kid who's a 6th grader, doing 6th grade math, 6th grade history, 6th grade writing, but is way behind in science, or those kinds of skills, we can leave the kid in 6th grade for all the other classes, but if math's a problem, put her back in a 4th grade math course and try to catch her up. Public schools can't do that, right? So, and this is also how you get around the Common Core problem. Kids are individuals. And those kids, those 6th graders who are reading at an 11th grade level, but doing everything else at 6th grade level, put them in 11th grade English class. Why not, right? Have that flexibility. So, here is the partnership. Somebody had asked me about this before this. It's kind of a neat idea. We only started it 2 years ago. We have now a couple dozen partnerships across the country. 3 in Alabama, 2 in Wisconsin, 1 in California. We've got them all over, 1 in Detroit, Michigan. And it's that concept that I just gave you, that what if we could take all the empty space? How many of America's woes across the board? How many of our woes, socially, psychologically, economically, patriotically, how many of America's woes could be solved simply by bringing God and school together again? Is there anything else? What if we took these empty churches, right? Small communities where they can't afford to pay teachers, they certainly can't have a different elementary school, middle school, high school teachers. What if we brought the information to them? Here's a short little clip we put together. Here's some of ours. Grace Christian in Wisconsin, Mulberry in Alabama. But here's a short little ad for this, what we send out to people.
Have you ever noticed how many churches sit empty throughout the week? And how much impact is 1 hour of Sunday school really having on today's youth? And if our children are spending most of their week in public school with no godly influence, what kind of influence are they getting? Well, Freedom Project Academy wants to change that, and it's a simple concept. Partner with churches across the country to provide fully accredited, biblically based K-12 online classes that allow every church that sits empty Monday through Friday to start their own school. Here's how it works. Freedom Project Academy is a Christ-centered, government-free online school that streams live classes into homes, private schools, and churches throughout the week. This means the amount of in-house faculty once needed to operate a Christian school is reduced to a few key people. With FPA, all you need is one person to observe a room full of students as they attend online classes. FPA provides more than 100 live courses from core subjects such as English, math, history, and science to Latin, Spanish, French, and economics. Schools can select the classes they want to use while providing their own courses for Bible study, music, art, and anything else they choose. FPA also provides all assignments, tests, and grading. And it doesn't matter if you have 2 students or 200. The partnership and quality of service from Freedom Project Academy remains at the highest level. So here is the real question. How big is your God? Let's continue to impact as many lives as possible by providing a Christ-centered education for children around the world. Let's fill up our churches all week long. Because together, we can faithfully educate America.
Some of those courses, too, that we can offer with these churches, the ones that every single church we've partnered with so far, the oldest one is about 3 years. They've all gone up every year in terms of the number of students. Think about history for a second. I just gave you a glimpse of the kind of history your kids were getting in the public schools. Freedom Project, in high school, we require 3 full years of American history and 1 of world history in their senior year. And the world history is kind of a survey course. But the American history courses are unique, and no one else does this. We spend 1 semester of a 2-semester year on American history, the colonial period for the first freshman year. But then the second semester, they read primary documents. They read de Tocqueville, right? They read Montesquieu. They read Adam Smith. They're reading actually, I call it civics. Remember when we used to teach civics in this country? The rights and not just the rights, the responsibilities of living in a republic, right? Our kids don't understand that anymore. So we teach them the history alongside, we make them constitutional scholars. We make them understand all of those things. This partnership program has, it's almost an unlimited potential. If you know somebody, a minister in a community church here who would love to be able to have some kids, just give us a call. We can make this work. And so we're doing it more and more. Now again, we should say that I don't care what alternative you choose to the public schools, but you got to choose one. I hope you understand this, right? There is no really safe place in the public schools for your kids anymore. The sexuality standards that I showed you, the national education sexuality standards, the core content, what is comprehensive sex reform? That's what it is. Back in the 1980s, you may recall, Ronald Reagan succeeded in getting abstinence-only education in the schools. It was a great idea that we will teach the biology of sex to kids and that's it, right? We'll teach them sperm and egg and no more, right? Gestation and all of that. But we're not going to teach them the morality of sex. We're not going to teach them sexual techniques. We're not going to teach them about how to manipulate birth control and prophylactics. We're not going to do any of that stuff. Well, ever since the mid-1980s, the left has been apoplectic about that. As early as 1987, they had started to work on comprehensive sex reform. And that's what those standards are. Back in the 70s and 80s, your kids would only be exposed to sex for 2 weeks in a health class, their sophomore year in high school. And any mom or dad who wanted to could stop their kid out of that. I'll teach my kids biology of sex, I don't want you to. It's simple. Well, now that's not possible. The comprehensive sexuality standard that I showed you, what they've done is they've mandated that every subject has to have a sexual content to it. So in mathematics, some time in mathematics has to be devoted to sexual issues. That's why, if you've been watching the news, moms and dads are freaking out by these kids' math questions, right? Story problems, right? How sexualized they are. In Wisconsin, by the way, University of Wisconsin, one of the things we've done is we're mandating that kids who want to be teachers, math teachers, English teachers at the university level, they have to take a segment about how to teach sex in their area. So if you're going to be a math teacher in high school, you have to take a little mini course on how to teach sexuality through mathematical pedagogy. See, comprehensive means you can't opt your kids. What are you going to do, opt your kids out of math, English, social studies? That's what they've done, right? The social justice worldview is now part of every class. There's no escape from it because they know if they just put it conveniently one semester, you'd opt your kid out. So they've woven it into the fabric of what they do. We, as I mentioned before, we're at work on a math curriculum. We've got grades kindergarten through 4 of a unique math curriculum done. It's traditional math. None of this goofy. This is the thing that always blows me away. You notice how progressive educators, over the last 50 years, every 5 years, somebody comes up with a new math program. But tell me if I'm wrong. We managed to teach kids math the same way for 2,000 years and put a man on the moon. Right? What do you need all the sociology of math for? All that we've done in the last 50 years with math is de-emphasize teaching math skills and working in all this social justice garbage. So how about a math program? How about, what a novel idea. Let's go back to a math curriculum that only deals with math, right? Jack and Jill and apples and oranges, right? That's all it is. You think, look at the things they're counting in your kids' math. If you could get your kids or grandkids to bring their math books home, look at the things they're counting in elementary school. Look at Johnny's 2 mommies, right? And the things that she's counting. That's how they work it in there. It's part of what happens here. So we're working on that too. We are, and I should say this too, we are an American Opinion Foundation. We are an adjunct of the John Birch Society, for God's sake. I mean, right? This is really spawned by the constitutional, patriotic, Christian values of the Birch Society. It's really what it is. An attempt to go back to a way of educating kids that was see, our motto is we teach kids how to think, never what to think. I have 100% confidence if we teach kids a good, solid, give them a good, solid Christian, good, solid classical education, they're smart enough to choose the right thing. Let them choose it. Right? They're not getting those opportunities in the schools anymore. And it starts at the universities. If you come to the talk tonight, I'll show you how this is not, universities are not about critical thinking. They're they don't want your kids to think. They want your kids to feel. Right? And we'll talk about that. So moving forward to the curriculum, we're almost done here. Okay. We do have a media, and this is the thing. Right? Without media, how do you reach the younger generations? We are a media-driven school, right? We are online. Our teachers are online. How do you touch these kids? Well, you got to have personalities and you got to have content that's driven for the young family. We've won 6 different Telly Awards for our educational programming, the kinds of things we want to feed into the schools. It's one of the things that's so remarkable to me is we've created a lot of educational videos for kids, and public schools have been snatching them from us. They've gone onto our website, they've taken our videos on the Constitution, on the presidents, and they've worked them into their own public school. So this kind of classical education is being taken by public school teachers and shown to some of those kids, which is remarkable in its own right. And so we've got a lot of shows, a lot of programming that we do. Our numbers are way up. We publish 40 different pieces of media every month, excuse me. We have, that's now about 250,000 monthly views. Last year alone, we had over 2 million YouTube views. We've been featured on dozens of websites. Other people are picking us up. We've been fortunate to be endorsed by some serious people. Scott Walker and Ron Johnson, our governor and our senator, Pat Gray from The Blaze, Steve Deace, Christian talk show host, Matt Walsh, now at the Daily Wire, Stephen Crowder, have all given us really great endorsements.
You said something to me this weekend, and you said, what is the name of this place?
FreedomProject Academy is what it's called.
Is that the thing you endorsed?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is your child's school not lining up with your family values? Is your child struggling with Common Core and federal testing? Consider our friends at FreedomProject Academy.
Well, we're going to send Noah through that this fall, and we're looking forward to it. And I first heard about these guys, actually they came to me when you guys were putting the Common Core movie together a few years ago.
Yeah.
And that issue was a hot burner issue, and the guy who was sort of the dean of the Academy, Dr. Duke Pesta, was actually doing a lot of talks around the country, warning people about the perils of Common Core.
Yeah, I've looked into them, and they are wildly anti-Common Core, which I love.
It's classic education.
How tired are you of Common Core and education bureaucrats? If you're as tired as me, Dan Bongino, the renegade Republican, then you need to go to Freedom Project Academy.
The whole reason I talk about it on the show is because I believe in a true education. An education that is not only steeped in truth, but it also comes from Judeo-Christian values, not doctrine, values.
I mean, we've gotten away from biblical worldview, and I believe Freedom Project is doing that. It's trying to create a biblical worldview that these people can start working through as they become adults and start making decisions for their family, how to live life, morality. Because we don't have that. Unfortunately, I don't know that the public school is just not teaching those things anymore.
They put into practice what we talk about in the movie Indoctrination, where we're talking about the problems of the public school system. Well, they provide an alternative, and an amazing alternative.
When you think of all the egregious things that are happening in government schools, when you think of the denial and the lying that's going on, the political correctness, the intimidation by the unions of public school teachers, the reinforcement of the lies that's brought through your college professors, etc. Freedom Project Education cuts through that. It goes to the root. It goes to the historical context. It illuminates the wonderful world of the founders, and it's not shy to talk about the Judeo-Christian worldview or the classical worldview that really is the foundation of this nation.
The American spirit is alive. It is alive. And we breathe new life into it through education, through projects like this.
They're utilizing the tools of the future while giving an education that is rooted in tradition and timeless moral values. So it's the best of both worlds. It's the best of every world, really. And best of all, no government involved.
And now you can do that, and you can do it with the best teachers, the best methods, and the best classes in the world. And I don't think there's any place better than that right now than Freedom Project Academy.
My van spends probably 200 days a year on the road, and I didn't want to leave my little girl at home, so we searched and searched for a way that she could do school and still be with me. And then we found FPA, and for us, it's absolutely perfect.
You're just not going to find it in other places. And so conservative Bible teaching, apologetic application, I don't see anybody else that's doing it out there at the level that y'all are doing it, so I would encourage everybody to consider it.
If you're a young person and you're involved in Freedom Project Academy, thank your parents. They did a fantastic job of finding this resource and putting you in a situation where you're getting probably the best education you could possibly get at this stage of life.
That last fellow, Tim Schmidt, he is the president of Delta Defense. He provides insurance for gun owners. Kind of a neat idea. became a Fortune 500 company. His was the son that got the full ride down here to Baylor. So his kid was being bullied very badly in school. His kid was really brilliant at math, but the other kids were just merciless, and the public schools were doing nothing about it. So he found us a couple of years ago, put his kid in, he thrived, and now he's going to Baylor down here. So I'll wrap up I say a couple of things. I want to leave a few minutes for questions. We're about 1:20. Just a couple last comments. Number one, I was dead serious about it. You guys know this because you're here. There's no one doing this like the John Birch Society. All these other, the tea parties come and they go, right? They're like, they wash over and they fall apart. But the society is what has remained strong over the last 50 years. That's critical, right? And so what we're doing here is trying to we're trying to prepare generations of kids who, when they go to college and beyond, will be able to keep their faith, be able to keep their love for the country, and be able to keep all of that stuff and not have it taken from them. We started 7 years ago with 14 people. We now have 12 people doing all that stuff. So we are a 501c3, which means that if you're looking for a good tax-free way to help further the cause, we certainly wouldn't argue with you on that. But you can see what we're trying to do here. And I'll close by saying, you know, it's not for everybody. There are some kids who just can't learn this way on a computer screen. There are some kids for whom it's not the right way. It's one way, though, and it's a way that I think is going to get a lot bigger moving forward. I know Marty is down here to try to help us with this, and we want to thank Bill and everybody else here who's let us come and speak to you. Texas is one of those places. We've got, I think, 2 schools in Texas right now. We need to be in places like this much more than we are, so get the word out. You've got a program guide there in front of you. Can I just ask for, how about a hand for the JBS guys who organized this today? Being here, and I hope some of you can come to the talk tonight. It's going to be quite eye-opening, the talk tonight. Are there, in the 10 minutes or so we've got left, any questions? Yeah.
Any chance that you could possibly get an audience with Bill Gates and Paul Ryan?
It's sad that you can use those 2 names in the same sentence and there's not much difference between them. That's what bothers me, right? We have tried in Wisconsin to move the needle, and we can't, any more than they can move it in Texas, right? You would think in Wisconsin, with a Republican governor, Republican Senate, Republican Assembly, and a Republican Supreme Court until just 2 weeks ago when they lost that, we've made no progress. I think what's happened is at the state level, this has all been so federalized now that even if a state like Wisconsin or Texas wanted out, how do you do it now? Because the feds control things. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Betsy DeVos in the Department of Education in Washington, they have to approve every single state curriculum or you can't use it. That's the ESSA Act gave her that power, right? It did, for the first 200 years of this country, the states could make their own educational policy. Now, you can, Texas, make your own educational policy, but all Betsy DeVos has to say is no, and you can't do it. They won't give you any money. Wow. They'll withhold your budget. So Bill Gates would never talk to us. He's the guy who paid for all of this. By the way, I don't know if you saw this, 2 months ago, Bill Gates admitted that it failed. He admitted that it was a failure. Common Core was a failure. He admitted it. But he also knows that there's no going back now. You can't pull it out. And the whole standardized model is here for the government schools. So Gates wouldn't talk to us. Paul Ryan will do what Paul Ryan does and pretend to be very conservative when he goes back to little Janesville, Wisconsin, and needs to get elected. And then he'll get to Washington, D.C. and pass monstrosities like the new budget and the ESSA Act. So I don't know how much good it would do. Yes?
Some of the constituents that were in my precinct convention this year were very concerned they were homeschoolers because they pay school taxes still, even though they homeschool. They don't have access to sporting programs. So is there anything within this that they would look at eventually, and how, you know? Sports? Yeah.
You know, sports, with the homeschool community, up in Wisconsin, we have homeschool basketball leagues. I mean, the moms and dads just put them on. They rent a gym and they travel around. I mean, it's not something we could probably do. I mean, we don't have that access with people all over the world and the country. But I've always scratched my head about the whole, if we homeschool our kids, they're not going to be socialized, and so therefore we shouldn't homeschool our kids. My argument is always this. The single most important thing you can do as parents is educate your kids. From the moment they're conceived, you're talking to them in utero, right? You're playing music for them from the moment they're born. Pretty much almost everything you do with your kids for the first 15 years is a teaching experience. There is no more personal, no more intimate, no more necessary thing we do with our kids than teach them. And yet, for some reason, we've decided as a culture, for 10 hours a day, for 9 months out of the year, we're going to turn them over to complete strangers with a completely alien worldview who don't like Christianity. We're going to turn them over to them to be educated. It doesn't make any sense to me. I have never, in all my travels across the country, I have never, ever, not one single time, met a homeschool mom who regrets it. They all say, I wish we'd have done it 3 years ago.
And what about the DVDs? Will those be available tonight, or do you have to order those online?
I just couldn't drag them down with me. I'll send you, just email me, I'll send you them. We've got all kinds of those DVDs. They're like $5 or nothing. We'll send them to you. So we can do that for you, yeah.
I also want to address your concern about social. You can tell a homeschooled child by their ease at talking to anybody of any age, which I teach privately and I teach in preschool piano. And I ended up homeschooling my son. The difference between the homeschoolers is they can handle any type of person. They're very comfortable with adults. Most kids cannot talk to adults comfortably. They don't really, and I can spot a homeschooler as soon as they talk to me because they're very comfortable. They can talk to you about all different kinds of things. It doesn't matter if they were unschooled or they went to a church-affiliated homeschool program, whatever. They have a comfort with all age levels.
Let me piggyback on that.
Beyond any public school child.
That's excellent. Let me piggyback on that. At the university level, the universities really, really want homeschool kids. I don't know if you know this. In the last 5 years, every major university and the big ones, Stanford, Duke, Harvard, Yale, they've all hired somebody whose sole job is to recruit homeschool kids. What happens is that the universities recognize that your homeschool kids have a higher basic level of preparedness, and they say yes sir, no ma'am, they don't get drunk and pass out in the classroom, they go to classes every week. So it's kind of a mixed feeling at the university level. They want your kids because your kids are going to show up and they're going to know what they're doing, but then they're going to try to pull away from your kids. It's like Californians who moved to Texas, right? They run away. Is there anyone here I just offended? Californians who run away from Texas. Californians run away from California, move here because the values, the climate, the taxes, the family values, and immediately start voting in people like they ran away from, right? That's exactly right. It's the same thing with your kids, right? We want your kids at the college level because they'll show up to class, they're prepared for class, but then we're going to twist them. The things that make them good students, we're going to try to yank out of them. So you're right, though. I think that all that lack of socialization means to a university professor is the kids aren't tattooed and stupid. That's what they mean by social. This fella, and then that gentleman, and then that.
Well, when did socialization trump God's design? Socialization is just a word. The mother and father instruct the child. The children are socialized by the mother and father, not their peers. When you're socialized by your peers, you become peer dependent and stupid and tatted up and a social justice idiot. Yes. No hold back. And you're ignorant of it and don't even know it because it's normal. When I homeschool my sons, people said, oh my God, how are you going to socialize them? That was the first NLP out of people's mouths. How are you going to socialize them? You're ruining their lives. If any of you want to know how they're doing today, come talk to me after that.
And by the way, do kids really need to learn how to play together? They don't. I would rather have my kids running around playing touch football in the backyard with a couple of their friends than all padded up and beating each other up on a football field anyway. So, you know, there's plenty of alternatives for that. I promise one more, this gentleman.
Have you ever heard that teachers teaching Common Core have to sign a form that they will not disclose what they're teaching to the parents?
Yes. Not only that, here's another interesting factoid for you. You know these big national exams on which all this is predicated? Do you know that your teachers aren't allowed to see them? Teachers don't see the exams the kids take. Did you know that teachers didn't write the exams? And did you know that teachers don't grade the exams? So tell me, even if these standardized tests were meaningful, your teachers never learn anything from them. Why are you doing this to your kids? Why are we standardized testing these kids when the teachers don't even get the results of the tests? It's all done to gather data for the federal government. These tests have no bearing on how your kids do in the classroom, and you're right. Teachers aren't even allowed to talk about it. They don't see them, they're not allowed to talk about what goes on in the classroom. If they come to you and ask you about what their kid's learning, they're not even legally obligated to show you the textbooks anymore.
As a teacher, Common Core is in the preschools.
Yes, it is.
I teach at 3 Primrose schools, and I remember the Common Core textbooks showing up for the preschool.
Yep.
And so even though we're in Texas, there's no escaping it. But on the good news is most of the teachers find ways around it. A lot of the teachers probably could lose their jobs. Like I have the kids will tell me about their testing and things like that. And the teachers do find ways around it.
Let's thank Dr. Pesta for a great presentation.